Okay, so thank you very much for joining in. You'll see now how Slido works, and now we're going to get off with the workshop and introduce ourselves. So my name is Linda Brindle, and I'm a senior psychotherapist with the Psychology in Schools team, and I'm here to present the workshop tonight with my colleague here.
And I'm Dr. Emmeline Guaspari. I'm a principal clinical psychologist, and I work in the early intervention CAM service, including the Psychology in Schools team.
Okay, so thank you, Emmy. So I'll be introducing the first half of the workshop and leading us through that, and then pass over to Emmy. And the session that we're covering tonight is a really big topic. And we know that we can only sort of do an introduction really to it tonight, but we hope that this introductory session will also feel still a very helpful session for you as parents and carers. And on the screen, you'll see a list of some of the things that we're hoping to cover. So we're thinking about how to increase understanding of self-harm and why people do it. We want to encourage you particularly to think about the young person that you're really here and have got in mind as you attend tonight, and think about what's going for your young person, what's going on, the function that their behaviour of self-harming serves for them. So we'll have some time to think about this, because this feels really central to the next things that we'll be focusing on. We'll be looking at some helpful coping strategies, and thinking about ways in which you might be able to find the right ones for your young person. And we'll be thinking more broadly about the best support that you can give to your child when they're engaging in these behaviours. And finally, as with all of our workshops, we always add some additional resources, because we know that this is an introductory session and you might need further information. We do record, as you're aware, this session, and we will send you the slides and a copy of the full recording so that you can return to what we've covered tonight and re-listen to bits if that's helpful. But at the end of the slides, we will be sharing at the end of the session tonight some additional resources which you might want to access, or your young person may want to access. And these slides will also give guidance of if you feel that you need further support in this area. Okay, I guess just before we move on to the next slide, I just want to highlight a couple of key things. We know that increasing our understanding of things can actually help us to our anxieties to be contained and feel more manageable. But we do recognise this is a really hard topic area. And we recognise that everyone that's joined tonight will have a very different experience around self-harm. So everyone joining this webinar will be in a different place. So we know this is a difficult topic, and we could spend an awful lot of time talking about it. Today, we're going to focus specifically on activities which engage with that self-harming. So what we are not going to be focusing on is where there's suicidal thinking or behaviour, where there's a desire to end life. So just to be clear, this is how we're limiting our focus tonight so it can be most useful for you. So it's the act of self-harm rather than a desire to end life that we'll be focusing on. Okay. So this is a really important slide, because we know that everyone is different. We know that all of you here will have had different life experiences, and all the children that you have in mind will also have different life experiences. So we're really aware that we're going to be sharing some ideas and things that we know may generally be helpful, but we want to really highlight to you that no one size fits all young person. So our aim is to help you to be thinking about what's going on for your young person, and if any of the strategies that we come up with seem to make sense, they might be something that you want to consider more about. But if something that we talk about does not make sense in the context of your child or young person, then we would actively encourage you to speak to a professional separately first before going ahead and doing something that just doesn't feel like it might quite fit. So as I said, we're naming at the end resources and other professional support to help you to think about this area. But what we're aiming in this workshop tonight is to be helpful, rather than unhelpful, and to try and lessen the risk so that you can provide an environment for your young person that is a safer, more helpful environment for them. Okay, let's get on and go to our next Slido question. As a parent and carer, I wonder how you feel when you think of your child or young person self-harming. So this is a chance just for some, perhaps a range of emotions, one-word answers that can just express some of those difficult feelings that you are likely to experience. So scared, yes, and this is a word cloud. So with more people that use similar words, then they are larger on the screen, and that's a really helpful way of us recognizing some shared experiences and shared feelings that you might all have. So we can see a whole range of things up on the cloud, but scared, worried, upset and sad is coming up really strong. Lots of other emotions that are coming up here. Broken-hearted, yeah, devastated, upsetting, worried, concerned, frightened, cold, yeah, confused, disconnected. Yeah, really helpful. Thank you for sharing those powerful, strong emotions. It's helpful to get a sense of the differences that people all experience in this area. There's not a one size fits all for us as parents and carers either. So thank you for sharing those. I want to just share this slide with you and this image, because I think this can be a really helpful image for us to hold in mind when we think about the topic of self-harm, because it can bring such strong and overwhelming emotions, as you've just shared with us on the Slido. It's really normal for self-harm to trigger such strong and overwhelming emotions, and we know that powerful emotions can be so all-consuming. And sometimes those emotions can be really evident and clear and out there. And other times, as some of you have shared, you can almost experience the opposite, that numbness and disconnection of really struggling to perhaps connect with what's going on for your young person. So I think this model might be really helpful for you to hold in mind. So the emotional mind, if we think about 3 different mind states here on the screen, if we look at that blue circle first, the emotional mind is that mind that's driven by feelings. When someone's in their emotional mind, their feelings control both their thoughts and their behaviors. And so if we're just in an emotional mind state, or if you're just in an emotional mind state, you might find that your thoughts and feelings can bring on quite impulsive actions, because there's little regard for the consequences, because you're fully in that emotional mind, rather than in that yellow circle, that reasonable, or sometimes called rational mind. That mind is driven by logic. So here decisions are made based on facts. You might use your intellect, you might use research or statistics, or just the knowledge that we often use through our past experience to guide what you do. So if you're purely in that reasonable, rational mind state, you're doing things based on all of those things rather than connecting in with your emotions. Now, as you'll see, that there's a third mind state in the middle here. And this mind state draws on both of the other 2, and it gets called the wise mind. And this is where you can recognize and respect your own feelings, so taking in that blue emotional mind state, but also be able to respond to them in a rational manner. So drawing on that yellow first to create that green, which is the blue and yellow together, creates that green color. So you're getting a balance when you're in wise mind between both reason and emotion. Now, all of us possess those 3 mind states, but we have a tendency to gravitate towards one most of the time. So when supporting your young person who self-harms, some of you may find that you're fully, completely in that emotional mind state in those times when emotions are really high. And that's the blue circle. But it might be for others of you here that you'll actually find that you're in those really tricky times, you're really in that rational mind state, and you try and stay focused on logic and practicalities and try and remain in that thinking reasonable mind when dealing with self-harming behaviors. And we're sharing this today because we think that it might be really helpful for you to be more aware of what mind state you're in when you're responding to your young people. And what we know is that through increased awareness of where we are in that moment, or in those different moments, we can choose whether it's more helpful to us to gravitate from the extremes to more the central ground, where we can draw on and balance both our reason as well as being in touch with our emotion. So we'd encourage you to hold on to this image and this thinking as we move forward. Okay, and this slide is something that we know is really, really important, and many of you might have heard before, and it's been talked about a lot. Look after yourself, especially since the pandemic, all of our well-being's being affected. But what we know is that this can't be underestimated, what we're trying to say on this slide. So when something evokes a strong emotional response in us, it's really important for us to maintain our own emotional health and well-being. So firstly, during this session, if you are finding this topic feels too hard as we start talking through some details of things just now, remember what I said. This is being recorded, so you can take a break knowing that actually you can go back to the recording in a couple of weeks if you need to find a better time for you to engage with this, and a time when you are able to access your clearer thinking and take on the information that we're sharing. So do remember that, or just have a break or move around and get a drink if you need to. But thinking more broadly about your well-being, as parents and carers trying to support your young person, it's so important that you are able to regulate yourself, manage your emotions, and as I was just talking about, access those wise minds, and so you're better able to be in a position to support your young person. So many of you will know, and we've talked about it in other workshops, the idea of putting your own oxygen mask on first. So when we're on planes and we're having the safety briefing, you're always told as parents it's no help to just put on your child's oxygen mask and then you not be in a position to be able to help them even more. You have to do your own oxygen mask first, get that on, so you're then in the best position to be able to help your child. And just as that analogy is there, this we know is really important for you as your roles as parents and carers in supporting your young people. Looking after yourself will help you be in the best place to support them. And so the last points on this slide is really just a reminder about trying to build in some regular activities that can help you to manage yourself and your own well-being. So we know regular activities that are slotted in throughout the week can really helpfully manage our own emotional needs. But on top of that, I guess, when things are feeling really tricky and you're trying to support your young person, you might need to take breaks in that moment. And once you've established that a young person is safe, it might be that you'll need to just take a little breather and pull yourself out of that situation for a minute, just to settle yourself a bit. Maybe there'll be time for a little bit more of a break, but look for opportunities to connect with others and get support from others, because we recognize this is a really tough job. Being a parent is a tough job anyway, and it's especially hard when we've got these additional challenges to face. So we just encourage you to hold on to those things as we then move forward to think a little bit more about this topic area. So what is self-harm? Okay, we've got a description on the screen. There are many out there. This is one that we thought was quite helpful and clear. The act of deliberately causing harm to oneself, either by causing a physical injury, by putting oneself in a dangerous situation, or by self-neglect. Now, commonly, some of the examples on the right of the screen, cutting, scratching, hair pulling, and burning. You can see the others written down there on the screen. And I guess also what goes into this category is where a young person perhaps has an underlying physical health condition, is prescribed medication, and if they're not using that medication correctly, that may also fit into the category of self-harm. So I think it's often broader than people automatically first think, and you tend to sort of go towards thinking about cutting for lots of people because that seems quite common, but there's a whole range of different ways in which people might self-harm. And as you'll see when we talk through this a little bit more in the workshop, people often move from one approach to trying out others as well, for various different reasons. Okay, so this slide is really just something to highlight for you, things to look out for if you're concerned that your child is self-harming. And these are just possible indicators that there might be some self-harm going on. And I guess the top three on the left-hand side may be key ones to sort of to spot. But the other indicators of possible self-harm are also listed below that. These could also just be indicative of a young person who's struggling with their low self-esteem or low mood. So you should never assume that if you see one or two of these things going on with your young person, that means that they're self-harming. But what it says on the right of the screen is multiple indications are a greater cause of concern than any one of these in isolation. Okay, now let's just try and make sense of self-harm a little bit just now. Understanding what it is and why it may be happening is really crucial, because it's really easy to jump to the quick fix solution of how can I help manage my young person? It's a natural response. How can we help solve this problem? Because it's distressing to see our young people in distress, but actually making sense of really what's going on is going to be far more helpful. Quick fix actions can often only serve to make us feel better because we feel that we're doing something, and that does often make us feel better in the moment. However, those quick fix solutions, if they're not really getting to the nub of what the difficulty is, can actually be pointless and sometimes may even instead feed a sense in our young people that we just don't understand what's going on for them. So this first part of the workshop tonight, we're wanting to spend a little bit more time thinking about understanding why self-harm might be happening, so you can really be thinking about what's going on for your young people. Okay, so young people and adolescents in particular possess really powerful emotional systems, but we know that they don't have the tools necessarily at this point to manage them effectively. So it's now known that young people's brains haven't actually fully developed until they're into their 20s. And so they are not yet always able to cope with these powerful emotional systems that are inside of them. And self-harm, therefore, is often seen by young people as a solution to help them to cope with how they are feeling in the moment. It can give some immediate relief, they report, in all sorts of different circumstances and for different reasons. Now, physical pain, the physical pain of self-harming, is often reported to be easier to deal with than their complex emotional pain. And therefore, by young people turning their emotional pain into physical pain, they actually feel they are better able to manage and regulate and validate their emotional pain. Now, I think it can be really hard for parents and carers because you get a different perspective often to a young person who is thinking about coping in the immediate time in front of them. As parents and carers, we have that perspective around the long term and wonder how things will be if a young person continues to be doing what they're doing, and what scars there may be on them, what impact some of the self-harm might have for their future. And that can be really hard for us to hold when perhaps our young people and their brains aren't so much looking ahead that far. So I guess what's really important is that we can recognise that self-harm can be considered to be a really valid way of coping with distressing thoughts and emotions in the short term. But in the longer term, we know it can feed into low self-esteem and low self-worth and have other impacts. And that's why we feel it's really important to think about understanding what's going on for young people, and also therefore thinking about alternatives that might be safer and healthier for them. And so we're going to be going on and thinking about what these might look like a little bit later on in this workshop. So there are all sorts of things that can lead to self-harm, and what we know is that there are often many of these different things can feed into lead to self-harming behaviours. What we do know is self-harm is a response to unbearable pain, and we know that it's really important for us to try and find out what's causing that pain. And so if possible, we can address that trigger. And either way, you can help your young person to find safer ways to cope and manage the distress that they're experiencing. So on the screen, you can see a whole list of different things that might feed into and lead to self-harming behaviours. And I guess none of those in front of you will feel like a surprise. There's relationship difficulties with problems of friends and families, worries that could be academic or for all other reasons, issues around bullying and abuse, can lead to low self-esteem and often feed self-harming behaviours. And as you can see, there'll be a whole list of other reasons why somebody may self-harm, but very often it's accumulation of a number of things together that we find brings on this behaviours. I guess I want to just highlight the drug and alcohol misuse one. So self-harm might be used to replace misusing alcohol or drugs as a coping strategy. But we also know that it may get worse, self-harm, if used in conjunction with also misusing drugs or alcohol. And so I guess it's really important to bear in mind what's going on for a young person and why they're self-harming, and how that interacts with other things that are going on with them, so that you can better support them to find alternative coping strategies. And lastly, I just want to highlight that what we know is another issue that can feed into self-harm is also where there's exposure to self-harm in others or suicide by somebody that's close to them. That can also be a factor that may contribute to somebody choosing to self-harm themselves. Okay, so thinking about you and your role as parents and carers, what we know it can be really helpful is if we've identified what some of the underlying issues are that are leading to the self-harming behaviour, then a role for a parent or carer or a trusted adult may be to support the young person in trying to work through and see if any of those problems, those triggers, can be addressed. Now, we know that not all of them can, but where things can be addressed and issues resolved, then you can have a really key role in supporting your young person with this. And one way you can do this is something that's just called problem solving. And that may just sound a really broad term, but you can use some really basic steps and teach your young person sort of to work through those different steps to really help them to learn there's a way to work through their problems. And you might start with a first step as just helping a young person to think, what is the key problem that's going on here? Or there might be a range of them. So which one is one that we can actually address and do something about? You might then think with them about a whole range of what are possible solutions that your young person can think, or you can think with them, that might help address the problems. And then for each of those solutions, think about the pros and cons of actually the impact of if you engage with those solutions, and the short and the long-term impact as well. And then you can choose one of those solutions, support your young person to do that. And the most important thing with problem solving is to never leave it there once you've chosen that solution, but actually to review how that solution went and if that was a helpful way to address that problem. Now, that can sound quite simple. You can look that up, but it's a very straightforward way. But if we can teach our young person to learn how to work through methodically to problems that are feeling difficult, that will actually enable them for the rest of their lives to learn a life skill, to feel that there's some things that they can manage. Now, we know that not all problems are solvable. And as I said, that's when it will be really important to think about how you can support your young person to find safer ways to manage their distress. So we'll be thinking a little bit about that shortly. Let's just think for a moment about how does self-harm help? Everyone does self-harm for a different reason. But there's some key themes, if we look more generally, of reasons that people might find self-harm helpful. Everyone's individual relationship with self-harm is complex, but I wonder what you think is the function or the functions of self-harm for your child or the child that you have in mind tonight. And I wonder if you asked that child or young person what the function is of their behaviour, if they'd say the same as what you're thinking or what you've got in mind. So in trying to make sense of any behaviour, looking at the function that the behaviour serves is really key. So we've established that typically self-harm is an emotional coping strategy, but how does it accomplish this coping? This can be really different for different young people. So for some young people, they say it helps them to feel real. So what does this mean? Sometimes they express that actually the feeling that they get when they self-harm actually enables them to escape from the painful or frightening experience of feeling perhaps empty or numb or disconnected from reality. So actually the experience of that pain can make a young person feel more alive, and perhaps also may be also to be able to feel more able to function in the short term. Some young people will say that actually the self-harm performs the function of keeping people away by making themselves sort of feel less attractive. They're sort of almost trying to push people away for some reason. Others will say that self-harm can be a really helpful way of expressing distress when perhaps there aren't the words. Often this happens when young people can really struggle to articulate their emotions, and this can be quite common with some young people with learning difficulties that don't have that ability to verbally express when they're feeling distress. But this can happen for all sorts of young people. That can be a way to articulate their distress. And it's really key, I guess, to highlight here that it's never been helpful to dismiss this as sort of attention seeking, because what we know is that there's nearly always something very seriously wrong that needs to be taken seriously. So there's communication of distress is really key to acknowledge and value as seeing as a key communication tool. And when we're thinking about communicating, one key thing will be to help support a young person to try and find more healthy ways to communicate. But this is clearly a tool that is often a strong, powerful one that people need to use. And lastly, just when dealing with distressing experiences and difficult emotions, many people say that self-harm is a helpful way of coping when there's no or other alternatives, when they're feeling overwhelmed or exposed or anxious or stressed or angry. Because self-harm can, in those instances, can lead to feelings of relief or calmness or a sense of being in control in that moment. I guess these are things that are really important to remember as parents and carers. So when we're thinking that we don't like seeing safe self-harming behaviour because we're concerned about the impact from our young people, we also need to be really mindful of what it's serving in a helpful way for the young people in those moments. And by doing this and identifying the function, this is actually going to be really central for helping to support your young person to find alternative ways, alternative things that can help address the function, but that aren't so harmful.
Hey, lovely. I'm going to take over from here, I think. And so we're going to, in our next half, going to focus on how to support your child or young person. So we're going to look at having difficult conversations, supporting your child to self-soothe, finding alternative coping strategies, medical management, harnessing others' help, and parent tips. Okay. So we know that self-harm can feel really scary for parents. We can feel really surprised. You talked about some of your feelings earlier in the Slido. It can feel really kind of petrifying, scary to kind of deal with our young people's self-harm. Now, if you think it's a concern, the next stage is to create an opportunity for your child to speak with you about it. Now, that can feel generally really daunting for a parent, but it's about opening up about difficulties or talking about self-harm. And it's about you as a parent being present and making them aware that you're available for them. So maybe thinking about getting the timing right of when you do that. So choosing a time when you can access a wise mind state yourself. So Linda spoke about that ability to hold in mind that emotion, but also that rational sort of side. So to create that wise mind in you, because we come with our own emotions and we have to manage those emotions when we have those difficult conversations. And so it's important that we have those conversations when we're not feeling really, really overwhelmed. And you might need to wait and allow time or space after a situation before you'll be able to access that wise mind state. But waiting for that time will mean that you'll be in a best place to hear your young person and respond to them in a really balanced and thoughtful way. So I guess when you have those opportunities to have those conversations, thinking about really simplistic and practical things like putting your phone on silent, being in a good space and not being interrupted. So trying to create that really safe space to have those conversations. So make sure you've taken a time which works for you, but also for your young person. So, you know, it's about you both being in a reasonably settled kind of frame of mind, not being distracted by other things. So maybe not having that conversation as you're getting ready to go out to work, you know, really creating that time and showing your young person that you're really interested. So show them that you're not judging, and are wanting to help and support, coming alongside them. So that's a really, really key bit. We want to be alongside the young person. Maybe the use of I statements is really helpful, as your comments won't be kind of seen as really blaming by the young person. So things like, I've been wondering how you're feeling, or I've noticed you seemed a bit down recently. So showing a real sense of curiosity and showing that you're interested as a person. Now, we talked a little bit already about coming alongside. So finding that balance of not being at a distance from your child, but not making them feel really trapped as well. So it's a really fine balance to get, really. When doing this, imagine being a dolphin, so rather than a kangaroo. Now that's an interesting concept, I guess, and you're wondering what I'm kind of going to be talking about here. Now, dolphins swim alongside their young to support them. So you can kind of see them swimming alongside each other. Now, that's what we're trying to teach you to kind of think about. You're wanting to be alongside, to support, to be there. They know you're right next to them. Now, kangaroos tend to have a tendency to pick up their young and hide them in their pouch. So that's the version we don't want you to be doing. The version we want you to do is go swim alongside and really try and listen, be there, try and not be judgmental about it. And that can be really, really hard as a parent, because we just want them to stop doing what they're doing, really. So at some point, it would be helpful to explore with them how the self-harm helps them. So Linda's talked about some of those ideas already, So maybe thinking about what's the function, what's behind it for them. And we'll look at that a little bit more shortly, as we'll think about sort of finding the meaning really for them. Don't be afraid to ask directly about self-harm, as not talking about it means young people don't see us as people that they can talk about it with us. So we want to create a space where they feel they can trust us with it and don't have to hide it, and don't feel kind of we're going to judge them and blame them for things. And you don't have to agree with them totally or totally understand, but letting your child or young person know you're trying to understand and are there for them is really, really important. Okay, so I would like you to think about what reasons might your children find it hard to open up to you. So why might they find it hard to open up to us? Yeah, feeling judged. Yeah, time. Yeah, we sometimes don't have time, or, I know my child this morning wanted to learn their laces. I said, I haven't got time for that. Think they'll get in trouble. Yeah. They might be worried about upsetting us. Yeah, scared of our reaction, shame. Yeah, really embarrassed. Can't articulate it. Absolutely. They might not have the words for it, and they don't want to worry us. I hear a lot of young people talking about, I don't want to worry my parents. They've got enough going on. Maybe different age. Yeah, upsetting the adult. Scared of the consequence. Yeah, what might you do? You might take all the things away that they do. Yeah, preconceived ideas. Yeah, they're going to think about what are you going to say, what you're going to think. Yeah, doesn't have the language skills again. Yeah, don't want to cause additional worry. Yeah, and don't understand themselves. So they might not be able to tell you. They might not have the words to explain why they're doing something. Hard to articulate feelings. Absolutely. So a real kind of sort of variety about feeling blame, feeling shame, feeling kind of not able to articulate things, and feeling really embarrassed, I think seems to be a really key one. Okay, what things do you do or could you do that might help your young person to talk or open up? I know that's a big question, isn't it? Yeah, listen. Yeah. That can be really hard because we have our own emotions. Hug them, yeah. Connect with something they like or enjoy. Absolutely. Be calm. Meet them at their level physically, so you're at eye level and not overbearing them. I love that one. That's a really great example. Thinking aloud, yeah. So you might be wondering aloud. I've been wondering. We talked a little bit about those I statements. Distract, colouring, yeah. Be available. Open-ended questions. Don't be so direct. Be their friend. Validate. Try not to offer too much comment or own views. Use paper and pen. Yes, that's a really nice idea, because sometimes young people find it really hard to talk, but they're able to write things down whenever they want to talk. Absolutely. Making that a really open door policy that they know they can come and see you whenever. Just see a couple more people typing, so I'm just going to give that another minute. Okay, give them time to open up, reassure. Yeah. Care and don't judge, keep them warm. Oh, I like that. Okay. Lovely. I'm going to, yeah, we cook together. I like that. So doing an activity together. Okay. So we know that teenagers don't always want to speak with their carers or foster links with kind of trusted family friends might be more easy, or an activity leader. And it might be that we want to encourage them to talk to someone in school if they don't want to talk to us, because teenagers talking to parents is often quite difficult and a kind of challenge in those years quite often. So in terms of self-care, we all need to learn ways to look after ourselves. So it's really important for us to learn about self-care, what things we can do to help take care of ourselves, which may calm or relax us, and learn how to be kind to ourselves, allowing us time to look after our own well-being. Now, I will say that's really important for us as parents as well as the young person. So this can look really different for different people. So in lockdown, many people discovered new ways to do that. So you can see lots of examples on this slide And there's a lovely example of 50 ways to take a break. I think we all tried various new things in lockdown. I certainly did, because it was about trying new things because we couldn't do some of the things we would normally do. So some people maybe went and did tidying or organising something or cleaning. Not my favourite thing, but some people really got into that in lockdown and had the most spotless houses going. Doing a hobby you enjoy, watching maybe a familiar TV programme, baking. So somebody was saying they were cooking together with their young person, playing video games, colouring in, having a cat on their lap. So a real variety of things. But some young people who want to be in a low stimulation environment, so maybe low lights, little noise, calming music, wrap up in a blanket or duvet. I certainly know I quite like my duvet at night time. It's lovely because it gives us that sense of comfort. We can support young people to be gentle and kind to themselves, help them to actively look after and do nice things for themselves, but make sure there are some good things happening each day and each week. So plan ahead. So try and think about what are those things that your young person really likes, values and enjoys. Show compassion, helping them not to give up on themselves and trying to help them not give themselves a really hard time. They could do something that they find enjoyable and relaxing. So for example, going for a walk, having a bath, can be really simple things like listening to music or eating and drinking something that they really enjoy, you know. So it could be like pizza night Friday with a movie, you know, that's something that you look forward to as a family even. Okay. So many young people find it helpful to make a self-soothe box. So they have a range of things they can do all in one place, and it's easy to access if they need it. So I'm going to show you a video, all being well.
I can't hear the sound.
I can't hear the sound either.
I wonder if we just need to pause and
oh, I could just hear it then, Linda. Can I just check if you can hear it if I play it again?
No.
No. Can you see the text underneath? Oh. Okay, sorry for those that may not have had the sound. Hopefully the subtitles will have helped. However, if you'd like to go and watch the video, it is, if you type in self-soothe box and young minds, it will come up for you and you can really watch it. It's a lovely video to watch. Okay, and so finding things which link to different senses supports disconnection from unhelpful or distressing thoughts and feelings and brings connection into the present moment. So that's why we often encourage young people to create self-soothe boxes. And if you think about yourself, actually, sometimes we look for kind of things that soothe us, something that we enjoy. People go for a nice bath because they find it really soothing. So thinking about our senses, so thinking about touch, something that feels nice to the young person. It can be a fidget toy, it can be a blanket, it can be a bit of velvet, can be all sorts of different things. Maybe thinking about smell, so relaxing things like candles or oils. Thinking about sound, so maybe different types of music that we respond to. Words, so maybe positive affirmations and quotes. So one of the young people in the video talked about, she has her little quotes in her box. Words, so really kind of thinking about those activities, so distracting or helpful activities like colouring, so maybe putting a little bit of colouring that you can put a lot of detail and thought into. Or memories, so somebody had photos and objects associated with really positive times can also be a really valuable addition, so like the young people in the video talk about. So obviously, when would we use those things? That might be a question. And I guess what we would say is that it's good to use those early when there's a slightly lower level of distress generally. So key things to include on this are sensory objects, playlists, maybe thinking about having those at the ready, positive memory pictures, soothing music. So having some of those things to hand and be ready with. Oh, sorry, I'm just gonna, oh, sorry, there we go. Okay, so self-soothing activities are great for when a person's struggling, but sometimes when the urge to self-harm becomes stronger, a young person may need something more focused to cope with and manage their difficult feelings. So we're looking here at some alternatives to consider. So consider other ways to help manage those symptoms. Alternatives should be linked to the function, so that's really important. And so ways to manage their feelings can include distraction, stress management techniques, and thinking of alternative methods of discharging extreme emotions. So sometimes maybe joining a social activity or sports group can be really helpful as a distraction, but actually engaging in sports also gives you that really good feel-good emotion, that kind of really good sort of physical feeling of having that really positive release. So some people find that putting off harming themselves can decrease or get rid of the urge to self-harm altogether sometimes. Reducing the accessibility of objects that might be used to self-harm, so removing pencil sharpeners, knives, medication, etc., may help to delay the impulse to self-harm. Things like Calm Harm apps can also be really helpful, and lots of young people I've worked with have talked about the value of having those apps. They count down how many days you haven't self-harmed and all of those sort of things. It's important to sort of match the intensity and the different sort of techniques to kind of the need, really. So there are kind of lots of alternatives like squeezing a stress ball, listening to loud music and dancing, so shaking it out and really kind of moving to it. Drawing on a place where you want to cut rather than actually cutting. So some young people talk about using red pen because it looks like the blood, and normally they might self-harm and cause bleeding. So using red pen, sometimes young people talk about finding really helpful. Maybe writing a letter to someone you're angry with and saying how you feel, but maybe not sending it, can be really helpful to release some of those emotions. And it might be that you write yourself a letter saying, I love you because, so reminding yourself about what it is about yourself that you care about. You might encourage a young person to talk to a friend or call a helpline. So we've known young people to call Samaritans or use Couth or Shout to have some of those conversations they feel unable to have with others. I'm sure lots of you have heard about the use of elastic bands to kind of cause that sense of relief while minimizing the harm, so kind of causing that sort of brief pain, really. And maybe it's about having an emergency box of things you can cope to help you cope. We've already talked a little bit about delaying self-harm. thinking about locking away things, talking to a friend and contracting not to self-harm maybe for an hour, or when you've talked to that person next. So you're kind of thinking about ways you can delay it. You might engage in an activity with somebody to try and help you delay that urge to self-harm or even reduce it. And I think one of the nice things to think about is rewarding yourself and not self-harming. So really sort of celebrating some of that success if you've managed to achieve that. Okay, here's just a few more examples of supporting alternative strategies. I won't go through all of them, but there are some examples on here, like, you know, actually the function might be that you feel something by self-harming. So Linda's talked a lot about that already, the kind of different functions, the different underlying kind of reasons people self-harm. So if it's something about feeling something, some people have talked about actually putting ice on the areas that they maybe self-harm being really quite uncomfortable. If you hold it on there for long enough, that's kind of uncomfortable, but it takes away sometimes that urge and that need to self-harm by cutting, for example. So when finding alternative things to do, it's really most effective if you know that you're matching it to the original function of the self-harm. So it's really key that we try and understand what is it about self-harm that young people kind of gain from it. So you could think together with the young person, come up with some ideas. So together, that might be a really shared idea. So how can we help? What can we try out? And the young person needs to look at options, and they need to try them out and see what works for them. So just because we've said ice works for some doesn't mean it works for others. You know, some people might not like some of those strategies. So there is an aspect of eliciting care. So for some young people, self-harming is about gaining time with people. Now, it's really important that we sort of think about, you know, self-harming and the sort of needing attention as a result. It's important to show care and concern to a young person. And it might be really nice that we spend time cleaning the wounds with them and helping them kind of with that. And it's a really good opportunity for connection. So, and it's also a good opportunity to kind of give care and show that you're really there for them. However, if that starts to become a pattern where the self-harm happens, so your young person gains more attention and time with you, then it might be that you have to think about giving that time and attention at alternative times. So if that's what you're finding is the function of their self-harm, and we're not saying that's the case for everybody. So because what you don't want to do is inadvertently encourage their self-harm, because that's what they're seeking in the process. Okay, so there's just a few examples, and when you get the slides sent to you, you'll be able to have a little bit more of a look at the details of those. Okay, so what we'd like to do is think about medical management of self-harm. Now, I'm not a medical expert, just to put it out there, but here are some basic guidance that you can follow. But if you're kind of really unsure, really do kind of seek some help from NHS services. So one of the examples is apply pressure to any bleeding cuts, then clean them under a running tap and use a sterile adhesive dressing. With burns, you think about using cooling it with water for about 10 to 30 minutes and then covering with cling film. So it depends obviously on the severity. And if a wound is infected, do make sure you seek some medical help. So if you're concerned about any injury or a child has taken tablets or harmful substances, seek urgent medical help. Always follow NHS advice. So there's always a number to phone if you need to get some advice. So speak to a health or social care professional to get the guidance and the support. So, and as we talked about before, of course, it is about trying to reduce access to things that can seriously harm. So, okay, so remembering this slide that Linda shared with you earlier, the most important thing you can do as a parent is being aware of which state you're in and thus be able to adjust that. So the emotion mind is great, but being led by this means decisions and responses are not always balanced and well thought through. So we've talked a lot about this already, and the reasoning mind helps you use information you've learned today, which can be so helpful, but not when it's used in isolation. So when thinking about how best to support your child or young person, it's good to draw on these things and find the balance in the wise mind. So the session will have given you quite a lot of information, that can help to resource your reasoning part of the brain. So your child or young person will benefit from your clear thinking, but also need your compassion, kindness, and understanding. So the wise mind is that state above the other two. So as when you're there, you find that you can access your intuition as well. So you're really kind of much more attuned at that point. So you're much more able to recognize and respect your feelings while responding to them in a rational manner, but also those emotions of your young person. So it's really important that we try and balance our own kind of mindset to enable us to balance the young person's mindset. Okay, now we've covered quite a lot today, and I'm mindful that we're whizzing out of time as per usual. We want to give you information to help give you a chance to understand your child's behaviour and how you might best support them, and essentially finding that other adults that your young person may speak to, or it might be not always you that they want to talk to, because maybe they're a teenager, and we just talked about how as a teenager we don't always want to talk to our parents. So we don't expect you as an individual to do everything by yourself in this scenario. So the slide is a reminder of that. So your job as a parent or carer is about being there, being available to your child, and creating opportunities for them to come along, to be alongside them and support them to develop and move towards independence. But if you care for an adolescent, then you might expect that we sort of try and encourage them to talk to somebody else if they don't want to talk to you. So it's about supporting positive relationships with other trusted adults if that's needed. And I know that can be really hard because we just want to be that kangaroo that puts our young person in that pouch. But remember, we want to come alongside and support. So if they aren't already talking to you and you're concerned, encourage them to talk to somebody else. It's better they're talking to somebody else than nobody. So speak to school if you're concerned, or if you want to ring a parent line, we'll put the link in the resources at the end, which we'll be sending round to you. Okay, so just kind of remembering the top tips today, it's about your reaction is important. It's important to validate and be non-judgmental. So the most important first step is to be available to your child. Work together on a plan. Manage your own emotions. Often you and your child want the same thing, to feel better, and having more resources to cope and notice that shared goal and working together to get there. That's going to be a really, really key thing. So encouraging your child to learn to self-soothe and have alternative coping strategies is really important. Having a shared communication system, seeking additional support, or using resources that we might suggest in a little while. It's okay if you're tearful. This may show that you really kind of care about them. But if you're overwhelmed with your emotions, then that might mean that your young person may worry about burdening you. So and they might think that you can't cope with their emotions or their problems. So try and kind of manage those. Use some of those other support mechanisms to release some of your emotions if you can manage that. And find an easy way to communicate. There were some lovely ideas about pen and paper and creative means. So maybe you could use a mood scale or a card or an emoji on a text. There's lots of different ideas. So there's lots of key resources for young people. We've got the Calm Harm app we talked about. And so there's a few different kind of ideas on here. Obviously there's school nursing, there's different websites. You'll get all of these when we send those slides out to you. And there's also a big long list of resources for parents and carers. So there's the Young Minds Parents Helpline, Parent Guide to Coping with Self-Harm, The Truth About Self-Harm. So there's lots of different kind of aspects that resources you can tap into. And there's also a few other contacts and websites for self-harm and suicide prevention on there as well. Okay, so what we'd like to, and I'm really sorry we're running over time, what would be really helpful to hear is whether you feel you've learned more about supporting your child around self-harming behaviour today. And it really, really helps us to have that feedback so we can adjust kind of our webinars as well. So it's really valuable for us to have this feedback at the end. Okay. Lovely. Okay, if you could let us know what 2 things you will take away from today's workshop, that would be really helpful as well. Like I said, we really value the feedback. Communication and support, yeah. Self-soothe box, be more dolphin than kangaroo, yeah. Alternative strategies and how to manage own mindset, yeah. And it's not always easy to manage our own mindset. Really, I'm not underestimating that. Self-soothing strategies, problem solving, yeah. Be a dolphin, yeah. Wonderful. 50 ways to take a break poster, yeah, that was lovely. Matching strategy to function, yeah. Yeah. Absolutely, great. So some of the strategies were really helpful. Self-soothe box, yeah. Lovely, thank you. Okay, soothe box. So the self-soothe box was really popular. Like I say, I do apologise about the sound, so please go and check it out. It's really easy to Google it as well. Okay. And we've reached the end of our presentation this evening. I'd like to say thank you very much for joining us this